When was the last time you were bored? Not nothing good on Netflix bored. Not I've scrolled through everything bored. Actually bored. Staring at a wall, waiting in a room with nothing to do and nothing in your hand, no phone, no podcast, no background noise. Just you and your own thoughts. Can you even remember? Can you remember the last time you sat in a waiting room and just waited? Or stood in a queue and didn't pull out your phone? Or lay in bed at night and stared at the ceiling until you fell asleep instead of scrolling until your eyes gave up? Boredom used to be one of the most common human experiences. It was everywhere. It was constant. Waiting rooms had nothing in them but chairs and a clock on the wall. Bus stops were just standing there, in silence, with strangers. Lunch breaks were eating and staring out a window. Long car rides were looking at fields. Being bored was completely normal. It was so normal that nobody thought of it as a thing. It was just the gaps between everything else. And then, sometime in the last 15 years, those gaps disappeared. Not slowly, not naturally. Boredom was killed. Quietly, deliberately, and for a very specific reason. And no one noticed it was gone, because the moment it disappeared, something else filled the space before you could miss it. Today, I'm going to show you who killed boredom, why they did it, and what they took from you when it died. It starts with a simple insight that changed everything. Your boredom is worth money. Every second you have nothing to do is a second that isn't generating revenue for someone. You're standing in a queue. That's 5 minutes of screen time someone could be monetizing. You're waiting for a friend at a cafe. That's 12 swipes through a feed. 12 ad impressions. 12 data points about what catches your eye. You're lying in bed before sleep. That's a podcast with sponsors. A playlist curated by an algorithm. A 30-minute scroll session that turns your rest into someone else's revenue. Companies looked at your idle time, much of the minutes in your day when you had nothing to do. And they didn't see rest. They saw uncaptured territory. And they colonized every second of it. The phone was the tool. Notifications were the trigger. And the content, the endless, infinite, never-stopping feed of content, was the product that filled the vacuum. Your every spare moment now has a tenant, and the tenant is paying rent to someone who isn't you. But here's where it stops being about advertising and starts being about your brain. Because what most people don't realize is that boredom isn't empty time. Boredom is when your brain does some of its most important work. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network. It's the state your brain enters when you're not focused on any specific task. When you're staring into space, when your mind drifts, when you're daydreaming without direction. And it is not idle. It is deeply, critically active. The default mode network is where your brain processes emotions you haven't had time to feel. Where it makes sense of experiences you haven't sorted through. Where it connects ideas that seemed completely unrelated. Where it rehearses the future and reinterprets the past. Where creativity happens. Not the kind of creativity that comes from sitting down and trying to be creative. The other kind, the kind that arrives uninvited while you're staring at the shower wall. The idea that shows up in the middle of a walk. The solution that appears when you stop looking for it. Some of the most celebrated breakthroughs in human history arrived during boredom. Newton sitting under a tree doing nothing. Archimedes lying in a bath, thinking about nothing in particular. Darwin on long, aimless walks with no destination and no podcast in his ears. Not while they were focused, not while they were optimizing, while they were doing absolutely nothing. That state, the aimless, unfocused, boring state, is where your brain connects dots it couldn't connect while you were busy, but your phone eliminated that state. The average person now checks their phone somewhere around 100 times a day. That's roughly every 10 waking minutes. Every 10 minutes, the default mode gets interrupted. Every 10 minutes, your brain gets pulled out of its background processing and into someone else's content. There are no gaps left. Every moment of potential boredom, every cue, every commute, every pause between tasks, is instantly filled before your brain has time to drift. before the mind wandering starts, before the idea forms. And the filling is not accidental. It was engineered. Pull to refresh was designed for the idle moment. Notifications are timed to arrive when you're not busy, not when you're deep in work, when you're pausing, when you're waiting, when there's a gap. That's when the red dot appears. Autoplay exists, so the silence between episodes never arrives. The next thing starts before you can decide whether you wanted it. Even loading times were optimized down to nothing, not for your convenience, but because 2 seconds of waiting was a 2-second window where you might put the phone down and let your mind wander. Every gap in your day was identified, targeted, and filled. And it's not just your phone. Walk into any waiting room now. There's a screen on the wall. Get in a taxi. There's a screen in the headrest. Step into an elevator. There's an ad on a screen beside the buttons. Even petrol pumps have screens now, playing video while you fill your car. The physical world has been redesigned to make sure you never, ever experience an unstimulated moment. And now, think about what this has done to children. I'm bored used to be the beginning of every childhood adventure. Build a fort, invent a game, draw something weird, go outside and see what happens. That sentence, I'm bored, was a launch pad. It was the moment when a child's brain, left with nothing to consume, started to create. Now, I'm bored is solved in 3 seconds with a screen. The launch pad was replaced with a landing pad. The child never has to leave, never has to invent, never has to tolerate the discomfort of having nothing, because nothing is no longer allowed. Studies show that children who are given a device every time they're bored develop lower frustration tolerance, shorter attention spans, and fewer self-generated ideas. They're not lazier. They were never given the chance to discover what their boredom would have built. We're not just losing boredom, we're losing the muscle that boredom trained, and the research makes it painfully clear. A psychologist named Sandy Mann at the University of Central Lancashire ran an experiment designed to test exactly this. She took one group of people and bored them on purpose, made them copy numbers from a phone book by hand for 15 minutes. The most tedious task imaginable. Then she gave both groups a creative challenge. The bored group outperformed the control group significantly. Being bored first made them more creative after, because boredom is a signal. It's your brain saying, there is nothing here. Go explore. Go invent. Go somewhere new. When you kill the signal, you kill the exploration. You become a consumer of other people's ideas instead of a producer of your own. And here's the question that should make you uncomfortable. If every idle second of your day is now filled with someone else's content, their videos, their music, their posts, their takes, their opinions, when do you think your own thoughts? When do your own ideas get room to arrive? When do you process what happened today instead of scrolling past it? When do you daydream? The answer, increasingly, is you don't. And that's not an accident. A mind that's always consuming doesn't compete with the things it consumes. A bored mind does. A bored mind wanders into new territory. It questions, it invents, it drifts into the kind of thinking no algorithm would ever serve you because it wasn't optimized for engagement. It was yours. That's what was taken. Not your time. Your inner life. The quiet space where you used to think your own thoughts, undirected, unoptimized, and unbothered. But you can take it back. Leave your phone in another room for 1 hour. Not a whole day. 1 hour. Notice the discomfort. That restless itch in your hand. The pull to check, to fill, to scroll. That's the withdrawal. It means the system is working exactly as designed. Sit with it. Let it pass. Take a walk without headphones. No podcast, no music. Just the sound of whatever's around you and whatever your brain decides to think about. Wait in a queue without pulling out your phone. Just stand there. Look around. Watch people. Let yourself be bored. The discomfort will feel strange at first, almost painful. And then, after a few minutes, something will shift. A thought you didn't expect. A connection you wouldn't have made. A memory that surfaces. an idea that arrives, something that had no room to exist until you stopped filling every gap. That is what boredom was always for. It wasn't wasted time. It wasn't empty. It wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a feature. The most creative, restorative human feature your brain has. And someone turned it off. Not to help you, to monetize the silence. And now you can see the strings.